You know, that whole thing of trying to find a job in the UK and even globally has been really difficult. Well, it's a thing. And actually, the employment statistics and data was released on the 14th of October, explaining some of the reasons behind why this is. And so if we look at the title for this video, it is UK job vacancies have fallen for 39 months straight. And I'm going to talk more about that in a bit more detail. Now, this is what the front page of the report looks like. You can just find it online on the ONS website, so check it out there. So the first thing I want to talk on is the highlight sort of like stats. So payrolled employees. So these are individuals who are on payroll. It doesn't include self-employed or any of that kind of stuff there, but there are statistics that do cover some of those different types of roles. So they fell by 93,000, okay? And we can see that's like a 0.3% fall, okay? So this is 93,000. We can also see that they rose by 10,000. Now, let's think about it. If there are, let's say, for example, 40 odd million jobs out there for anyone aged 16 to 64, 10,000 is negligible. So really, this rising doesn't really mean anything. It doesn't mean anything at all. And obviously, this is from a quarterly range. The 93,000 was a yearly range. When it comes to the quarter between June and August of 2024 versus the quarter between June and August 2025, it fell by 115,000. So it's getting worse, it looks like. Year on year, it's looking worse. And it also fell by 31,000 in the last quarter. Now, of course, what's important here in terms of context is the number and the percentage. These percentages are small, but I don't want to act as if they're nothing because it affects lives here. But they're negligible in terms of the grand scheme of things, okay? Now, it's estimated, and I'll show you this as well, that there is a total of 30.3 million jobs out there, okay? So, and that's payrolled employees. That doesn't necessarily include those contractors or consultants who are self-employed and all of that kind of stuff. I'm not really going to look into any predictions or early data on all of that kind of stuff there. That doesn't do anything for me or you, really and truly. It maybe gives you an idea of how good or bad these different bodies are at predicting things, but I'm not going to waste time on that stuff. So I want to talk about the quality of some of this data. Now, when thinking about this, number one, you've got the RTI. So this is real-time info via PAYE. What does this really mean? So this is literally the information that is processed and highlights whether somebody is on PAYE. And so actually, this is really good, accurate data, okay, as best as it can be. I can't really talk to how it was put together and all that kind of stuff there, but it's as good as it can be. Then you've got LFS data. So this is labor force survey data. Now, they had made some improvements to this. I think it was in January of 2024. And actually, they're pretty much saying that there's some teething problems. And what this covers is self-employed individuals, unemployment, inactivity, all of that kind of stuff there for households. So it's good to capture this information, but it's not necessarily going to be the most accurate way to capture information relative to information that's just processed anyway, because it's practically people's pay on PAYE, pay as you earn. And so actually, we can have some comparisons, but it won't be 100% accurate. And then you've got WFJ, so workforce jobs data, which is based on business surveys. And so I'm saying this stuff because as I go through some of this data, it's going to be sourced from different types of information. Really, really important to bear this in mind. So as we move along, and I have to get used to this, we've got some high-level stats on employment data. So employment rate, and typically this is the rate of employment, how quickly people are being employed, for 16 to 64-year-olds was 75.1%. And just to give you an idea whether that's good or bad, I've got a chart here, okay? So this here basically shows you the 75.1%. That's what that shows you. And actually, let me make this a bit smaller. And actually, if you draw a line here, you'll see this is relatively low compared to, again, 2023 and actually levels before the pandemic. Okay. So before the pandemic. And actually this is aligned to, if we come here to 2019, these are the highs in 2019. So it kind of gives you a bit of a clue, but we're not doing necessarily great, but actually we're looking for something above 75. If I'm being honest, based on this chart alone, okay, looking at these peaks. So hopefully that gives you an idea. Now, if we move this along and we go back to the data, it also says the unemployment rate is 4.8% for 16 plus, okay, quarter on quarter. Of course, you can look at all of these other statistics here to sort of like, or wording, should I say, to give you some ideas of how well we're doing. And again, if we go back to the unemployment data, look at this. This is where it becomes interesting. So right now, this is where we are right here. And look at this. There is a steady increase. There is a steady increase that's happening from 2022 all the way to 2025, 26. We're seeing that steady increase. And again, it was pretty high. When was this? This was COVID. When did COVID happen? It happened in March of 2020. And we saw that steady increase. So we're approaching those numbers, which is a bit insane. But the point I'm making is that it's not, doesn't look like it's reversing per se. Maybe it will, who knows? But there will be more clues to suggest whether it's reversing or not. So if we move this along, we can also see economic activity for 16 to 64-year-olds is 21%. So not really sort of like using their monies, etc., etc. Claimant counts, so that has been up month for month, and year on year, it's gone down. Okay, so there's 1.7 million claimants, thereabouts at least anyway. Cool. So let's move this along. We've got job vacancies information, really important. So basically, how many jobs are available out there on the market? And it's stating here that it's fallen by 9,000. Of course, this is a difference in negative 1.3%. But there is a total of 717,000 jobs. But this marks, and this is the most important thing, 39th consecutive drop. This is insane. Vacancies declined in 9 of 18 industries. So what does this really mean? Okay, so let's see if I can sort of like find this information. So if we come here, this is the vacancies that we can see. So you'll see here on this chart, you've got the total number of vacancies within the UK for the quarter, July to September. And you can see the biggest vacancies are sat in the green spaces that I've marked. So the biggest ones being human health and social work activities, vacancies in professional, scientific and technical activities, accommodation and food, wholesale, retail, trade, etc., and manufacturing. But if we go all the way up, okay, and we, go back to the initial month to make it 39 months, this was June, August of 2022. And you can see the numbers start to decline, okay? Not perfectly, but they're declining. You go from 1,200 to 1,100 to 1,000 to 900 to 800 to 700. It's been declining. So there's a trend there. And actually, if you look deep into this data, you can see where those trends exist. So that gives you a bit of an idea when it comes to some of this stuff. Let's go back to our handy presentation. So if we come back to this, earnings and pay. This is a really interesting chart. So it says here that the median monthly pay is £2,546, okay? And that is an increase of roughly, let's say, 120 odd or 130 odd pounds from the previous month. What is the median? Well, quite simply, if you remember your maths and statistics, and hopefully I get this right because I'm not a statistician by any means, it is the middle number amongst the total of number of numbers that is in your, your pool. So for example, if you had 1, 1, 3, 4, 7, and 8, the middle number would be 4, not because 8 divided by 2 is 4, but because it's literally the middle number. And so this is giving us an idea of, again, what that middle number looks like specifically. Now, if we look at the mean monthly pay, which a lot of people say is just the average, or the best way to understand it, that is the total amount of money that exists or pay that exists divided by the total number of people, you've got 3,422. Now, the question I want you to think about is, how does that make sense when there are less people able to find jobs? And actually, my ideology behind this is that you have, again, less paid workers, lower skilled workers who are losing jobs, and higher skilled workers who are staying in jobs or keeping jobs or getting promotions or whatever it may be, who are contributing to this higher number. Okay. And that's essentially what it is, because what I've highlighted here is that, and I need to get the thing up, is that, during COVID, these numbers were much lower. Okay. Now, obviously, way before COVID, these numbers were much lower, but these numbers were much lower. And so really important information to bear in mind here. The other thing to note is that when it comes to earnings and pay, there are different adjustments that they take into consideration. So consumer price index and housing. So this is why it says includes housing. So the annual growth for regular pay is 0.6%. This is real pay, and 0.8% for total pay. And then the other metric they use is CPI, consumer price index adjusted. So this excludes housing. This is 0.9% and 1.2% for total pay. This doesn't necessarily align with what inflation is at the moment, which I believe is, I need to check 3% or whatever it is, or 4%. But we can check that later on. You can check that. The point being made is that it's insane that this is what this looks like. Okay. But bear this number in mind. Now I've got another figure. Okay. Another set of figures. Now this is the high earners. Okay. So looked at the percentage, the top 1%, the top 5%, and the top 10% within the UK in terms of earners. And actually what we're seeing here is actually the top 10% make £5,764. This is as of August 2025. The top 5% make £7,765 per month. The top 1% make £16,208 per month. That is insane. So these are all the numbers that they make. Of course, this data is skewed based on the really, really affluent in society, the bankers, the financiers, all of those different ones, etc., etc. If we look at the difference from 5 years ago, and this is me thinking about COVID, then what we'll see is actually top 10% was £4,430. There's roughly £1,300 difference. The top 5% was £6,033, about £1,700 difference. And then the top 1% was 12,500, roughly 3,800 difference, something to that effect anyway. So that is this is what the numbers look like. So you think to yourself, do you fit within this banner? Who knows? Okay. Do you fit within this banner? I think also to note is that when we're looking at the amount of, jobs coming in and coming out, what you're seeing here is interesting numbers. So again, when we're looking at this information, you've got here people starting jobs, 590,000, really 591,000. People leaving jobs, 581,000. So there's a difference of 9,626. That's negligible. That's not that much. That's pretty much 0%. So there's not much change. So this isn't a significant thing. It may look significant to us because it's 1,000 something, but really and truly, it means nothing when it comes to the statistical significance of it, so to speak. So for the previous year, we had 593,469 jobs coming in, people starting new jobs, and actually an outflow of 618,833. So you could argue as getting better year on year. Again, you can see some of this information and data. Have I got this up? And let's just check. Yes, I do. So if you remember, I was talking about the number of payrolled workers. So this is the RTI data, real-time info. And this is what this is here specifically. Then if you look at the median pay, you can see here, if I scroll all the way down, you'll see here, this is the median pay, and I've highlighted the median pay for different months, so you can see that for yourself. And then if we look at the mean pay, which a lot of us call the average, okay, then what you'll see, if I scroll all the way down, is, again, for 2025 August, £3,422. Again, the previous year, 3,217, etc., etc. And so this is a great way of seeing where you measure against this stuff. What's interesting is when it comes to this stuff, well, you look at your percentile, okay? So just to note, the last three columns are the top 10, 5, and 1%. So if I scroll all the way to the right, so this is 2025. So this is the top 10%, top 5%, top 1%. This is 2024, top 10%, top 5%, top 1%. And then 23, this is 23, this is 22, and this is 21. This is around COVID times as well. So this gives you an idea of what this looks like specifically. Of course, when we're looking at the inflows, so those starting new jobs versus those who are leaving a job, this gives you an idea of what the numbers look like. So this is what we look at for this year, August. This is what it looked like last year, August. And this is what the difference is. And this is what it looked like in 2023. So again, it was healthier in 2023. It was healthier in 2022. It was healthier in 2021. But in 2020, it didn't look that great because of COVID, most likely. And so this gives you an idea of what these look like over the years, but it's been in the positive. Okay, it hasn't been as low as it's been right now, which is 9,000 odd in terms of the difference between those starting and those leaving a job. So that gives you a very strong idea of all of this stuff. Now, if we keep it moving, move to the end. So we got public sector employment trends. Now, why have I got public sector? Well, the data is a bit better for the public sector side of things. And so what we're seeing here is that there are a number of different sort of like industries involved in the public sector. But what I'm going to do is I'm just going to show you the table. I think that's much better to do. So what we can see here is that there are different sort of like sectors, okay? So, or industry. So we got construction, HM forces, so Her Majesty the Forces, policing, including civilians, public administration, civil service, education, NHS, health and social care, and other things, including financial corporations. What we're seeing here is that the biggest number here, okay, is the NHS. That's the biggest number, okay? Oh, I can't do that, so let's not worry about that. So the NHS is the biggest one with 2,000 odd. Education comes very close to it. And then we've got public administration, okay? But then when we look at the trend, so let's just look at the NHS as an example. When we look at the trend, you will see roughly the NHS has been the most and actually been on par with education, okay? So if we keep on scrolling, let's just stop here until 1999, it's roughly been the biggest anyway, followed by education, which has roughly been around the same, not huge changes. And just to let you know, these are in thousands. So this is, for example, this is 1.173 million. This is 1.381 million, etc., etc. So National Health Service and education has always been one of the biggest. And then you've got public administration, which has pretty much been consistent in terms of numbers. But then when we look at some of the others, let's look at construction as an example. This has been falling. So it started off strong in the hundreds of thousands. Then we've gone to the 99s, the 80s, the 70s, the 60s. It's just been declining. It's just been declining. The sort of like the army and the Her Majesty and the forces, that has been declining. Okay, that has been declining. Policing, roughly kind of the same, to be fair. Going up and down, it fluctuates. And so this all gives you an idea. Health and social care. Again, this has steadily been declining. And so we know where a lot of our money is being spent when it comes to the public sector. So that should give you a strong idea of what all of this means really and truly. Now, if we look at the public and private sector to get an idea, then we can see some more information. So this should be public and private sector. So what we're seeing here is that we've got, again, different instances where you have public sector and the private sector, okay? So here, as an example, you've got 18% of all jobs within the UK currently right now are made up of public sector roles. And actually, it's still dominant for the private sector. They're making up 82%. This is what this number represents. But if we look at, again, the private sector, they've always been quite chunky in terms of how much they dominate. Now, not necessarily as much over the years. So you can see it's less in the early 2000s. But still, it's about 80-odd%. So this seems to be pretty normal. And the public sector has roughly been anywhere between 15 to 20-odd%. And so it's gaining some steam. It's gaining some steam. And this is why we're seeing more money being pumped into those different areas. So again, it's also good to check out what the self-employment rates look like. So for those of you who are looking into contracting or consulting or setting up your own business, this will give you an idea of the attractiveness, potentially at least anyway, when it comes to those opportunities. So here, again, this shows you that there are roughly 4.2 million different self-employed individuals. So that's probably like 10-odd% of the PAYE. This was taken from the LFS data, so the labor force survey, that you can kind of take it with a pinch of salt. But let's look at some of the stats on that as well. So here you can see that there are different sort of like industries that they've flagged, so to speak. And essentially, let's just scroll all the way to the end. You can see there are some things that I've highlighted in green. Why? These are the ones that stand out. By far, services dominates. Now, how do you define services? I probably need to do a bit more digging. You can probably do that yourself. But I'm thinking management services, program management, project management, services for businesses, all of that kind of stuff. They're consultancies. It's really consultancies. This has grown and it's consistently been pretty big. If you look at it over the years, it's in the thousands. And of course, it's 1,000 times 1,000 in this instance. So what we have here for June 2025 is 3.2 million, just under 3.2 million different services that exist in that sense, way, shape and form. And so this is what dominates. This takes up about 75% of all services that exist within all self-employment, that exists within the UK. You've also got washing and dry cleaning of textile and fur products. So that's still pretty healthy, okay, if that's a business idea you want. Human health activities, education is another one, okay. You've also got services to buildings and landscape activities. You could argue legal accounting activities and activities of head offices and management consultancy. So slightly different to the other services I was talking about before. I think it's more specific. You've got food and beverages. I'm only picking out the high ones, okay. That's like over 95. You've got specialized construction activity, construction of buildings. So construction's a big thing. This all gives you a bit of an idea, okay? So this is all to say, in a nutshell, that there's a lot happening in the UK right now. There's a lot happening. And actually, the opportunities are becoming less and less and less based on the vacancies. There are some minor improvements, whether it's year on year, but not necessarily quarter on quarter or month on month. And actually, it just confirms that it is difficult, but there are some industries that are thriving, whether that's within the self-employment space or in the public sector space. So how do you find these opportunities? Well, I would argue that you check out my YouTube channel to learn more about how you can do that. Or if you're interested, you can book a discovery call. We can talk more about this stuff and how you can become a portfolio careerist that can develop the right level of independent consultancy that makes sense for you. So if you've enjoyed this, let me know, what part did you like? What part did you agree with, disagree with? I'd love to know your thoughts, what your insights on the data. Of course, if you want to see more videos centered around portfolio careers, contracting and independent consulting, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to this channel and hit the notification bell. And as always, my friends, understand, reach and expand. Peace.